Hello, friends and fellow lovers of all things beachy. Welcome to The Beach Speaks, the podcast that shares stories about the beach and our connection to it. I'm your host and beach lover, Paige Friend, helping you reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. So grab a cool drink, relax in your beach chair, stick your toes in the sand, and enjoy this episode of The Beach Speaks. Hey, beach lover. If you're as passionate about books as you are beaches, you are going to love this conversation with Jane Rosen. Jane is an author, screenwriter, and former Huffington Post contributor, and today we'll be talking about her latest book, On Fire Island. It's a place Jane knows intimately because she's been a resident there for 30 years. On Fire Island is a story of love and loss, but even more, it's about human connection and ways we can help each other through our experiences and empathy. Fire Island is the center island of the Outer Barrier Islands that parallel the south shore of Long Island, New York. And the part of Fire Island that Jane and I talk about today is remote, and it only has a few hundred residents. And although I've never been to Fire Island, I vaguely remember my parents talking about visiting friends there. Or maybe it was a celebrity that my father was performing with at the time. I don't know, it was decades ago. As I listened to Jane describe it, I could see why this remote island would be popular with celebrities. A place where you could just drop the glitz and the glam of notoriety at your doorstep, put on a bathing suit, sit by the beach, and just be your normal, everyday neighbor, playing baseball with the kids, enjoying leisurely bike rides, gathering around a fire pit on the beach, watching the sunset over the water. Many famous actors, musicians, and writers have lived there over the years, such as comedy legends of film and TV Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner, and musician-writer John Lennon, Joseph Heller, the author of the classic novel Catch-22, which, by the way, Catch-22 just landed on the American Library Association's list of banned and challenged classics. And singer-actor Harry Belafonte, the king of Calypso. He's known for singing the Banana Boat song. You know, Day-o, day-o, daylight come and me one go home. I just had to do that. My father was a singer-entertainer, and it's in my genes. I mentioned to Jane that my father once sang on a world tour with Harry Belafonte. Maybe he was the one my parents visited. And it turns out that the house Jane lives in was once visited by Harry Belafonte. We started putting two and two together, and yeah, it's very possible that my parents might have stayed at her house. How about that for a beach connection? We talked about the beach community and how it connects us to lifelong friends and loved ones, past and present, in ways that only the beach can. It's the perfect scenario for a writer. And I was curious to know about her writing process. What's the difference between writing a screenplay and a novel? And since the book is set on Fire Island, just how close are the characters to the real people who live there? A writer never tells. Or do they? Let's find out. Here's Jane. Hi, Jane. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Paige. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a delight. I was really happy and surprised to hear from Jenny. She had reached out and told me about you and your life at the beach and the books that you write. And when I heard about that, I thought my two favorite subjects, books and beaches. So I knew I really wanted to talk to you today. I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests is, how is the beach speaking to you today?
The beach speaks to me every day. I think it kind of calls me to it. It's where I feel the most at peace. A walk there, sometimes I feel like I'm walking with people that aren't with me anymore because they loved the beach. Like my mom loved the beach. And sometimes I feel her walking next to me when I take a walk on the beach. More so than I do anywhere else in the world, I think. So the beach does a lot for me.
Yeah, I definitely get that connection and the connection with loved ones that aren't really with us anymore because I had visited my parents for a number of years when they lived at Clearwater Beach. I'm on the opposite end of Florida now on the Atlantic side at Jacksonville Beach. But while they were still with us, it was one of our favorite things to do was to go and sit there for not too long because it was it was a bit of a trip to get them out there and back, but it was one of those things that I'll remember forever. And then when they both passed, I spent a lot of solo times on the beach just thinking about them and getting that peace and serenity that you need when your life kind of turns upside down. I know you've had probably a couple of episodes like that in your life. You might want to talk about that too, but I do want to talk about where you are exactly and I guess, what's it like?
What's Fire Island like?
Yeah.
Fire Island is different than anywhere I've ever been, and I think it's because there's a lack of cars. So there's all these different towns that don't meld together. Each town has its own personality because you're really only mostly traveling to the town to your left or to your right because it's a long island. I think it's 26 miles or 17 miles. I can't remember right now, but yeah, it just is very unique. Each town is very unique. The no car thing is just takes it to a whole different level. It has a quiet peace to it. You'll hear people talking. You'll hear the ding of a baseball bat, but you don't hear cars, and that's really great.
Yeah. When I heard that you lived in Fire Island and actually had written a book about it, I was immediately struck by the idea, and I wish my parents were around to tell me this for sure. I remember them talking about Fire Island. We lived outside of the city at the time near New Rochelle. And I guess they must have had friends that lived at Fire Island or something because I remember them talking about going there. I must have had someone that lived there, or I know there have been times in some places that celebrities take up residence there. And my father was performing in music at the time in the city, and I don't know, he might have been performing with somebody that lived out there.
What kind of music did he do?
Well, he sang with, this was back in the 50s and 60s, with Harry Belafonte. And
Harry Belafonte stayed in my house way before I owned the house. The story is that in the 50s, he was a frequent visitor of a man named Lester Rondell who built my house. Lester Rondell was an advertising guy, like a madman kind of guy, but also an artist. So my house has high ceilings and big windows. And Harry Belafonte was a frequent visitor. And years ago, I met him at a film festival, and I asked him specifically, because, rumors start and twirl, and it could have had nothing to do with my house. But it was true. He had stayed in my house.
Oh, my goodness. Mm-hmm. Talk about...
I can't believe you just said Harry Belafonte.
Synchronicity. I know. I was just actually talking to a young man who is from Jamaica, and he hadn't heard of Harry Belafonte. And I said, well, he's from Jamaica. He might have. And we were naming off some songs, and he was like, oh, yeah. He's all of, 27. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of before his time. Yeah, my father did a world tour with him and some other musicians. And so, maybe that's, maybe they were in your house at the same time. I don't know.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
Well, I know. Have you always lived at Fire Island, or do you go back and forth from another place?
So we go back and forth from New York City.
Mm-hmm.
When I was just out of college, like many people just out of college, I rented a share in a house in Ocean Beach, which is the biggest town in Fire Island, with a bunch of other kids from school and from the city. And eventually, I didn't go there, and my roommate was going, and I helped her carry her bags, long story, and this man answered the door, and it was my husband. We met. At that time, you weren't allowed to drink anything on the streets of Ocean Beach. Nothing, not even water, because they didn't want the glass bottles falling or any garbage or anything like that. So my husband was on the beach, not my husband at the time, and we decided to go to town and get a drink, a Snapple, and he got taken into the police station. He opened up the Snapple, took a sip, and was brought into the police station.
Oh, no.
I said to the cop, this is my boyfriend. He just got off the boat, when I was explaining the rules of Fire Island to him. And I told him this nonsense story because I had just met this guy, and he let us go. He let Warren go, my husband. And we rode the train home the next day on the Long Island Railroad holding hands. And we were engaged 5.5 months later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And our 10th anniversary, we had a big party out in Fire Island. And the cop who arrested him came with 2 Snapple bottles with handcuffs attached to them and gave it to us as a gift. And it was kind of amazing.
Oh, my goodness. My husband and I met on the beach as well. We had been talking to each other briefly before meeting on the beach, and we weren't getting in trouble with the police, but
I mean, we didn't do anything so bad. We drank
No. We just looked at each other and were like, you're the one.
Aww.
And it wasn't too much longer after that we were engaged as well. And there's something about the beach that can bring people together, right?
I think on Fire Island, there are many, many people there that met there, because it's not an easy place to own a home because you can't drive up to it. So things are a bit of a hassle. And I think you have to have maybe that romantic connection to say, this is where I'm going to put down roots in this narrow little island where really one wave could wipe it out. You have to have a real love for it.
If you can't drive I'm assuming you drive up the mainland, Long Island, I guess, and then catch a ferry or something.
Exactly.
Is that how
Take
you get
the
there?
ferry
Okay.
out. There are people that have cars there. They can't use them in the summer. If you live there full time, you're allowed to have a car, but you can't use it in the summertime. And there's a gated entrance at one end of the island, and you have to literally drive on the beach for a lot of it. So it's very complicated. You have to understand the tides and all of that.
Well, I really love that aspect of keeping the beach as pristine and Snapple bottle free as possible. We have a little bit of a different situation. Of course, we're a couple hours north of Daytona Beach, which is known for your ability to drive. And it is kind of funny because people often do get stuck on the beach because of the tide, or they just don't understand driving in the sand. There's always somebody there to help pull you out. But aside from seeing it once or twice as a novelty, I thought, this is not really for me. So up where we are, we have quite a bit of stretch of sand where you could possibly drive, but it's just not something that's allowed or that anybody does. However, we do have a fair number of people that come to visit, and I don't know about you, but it just seems like people who come to visit, and I may be mischaracterizing visitors, there's a lot left behind that should go in a garbage can, but somehow ends up just lining the shore. I think that upsets any beach lover.
So upsetting. But we're really strict on Fire Island, really strict, and there's garbage pails all over, and there are not a lot of in my town, there are not a lot of visitors because there's no restaurant or anything like that in my town, no real public bathroom. So you go to like the main town, like Ocean Beach, and I think that they do have more trouble with trash than I do, but most
Yeah.
people are pretty respectful. I do have a friend whose parents drove out after the driving, got caught on a rock, and lost their Range Rover. They had to abandon the car eventually because the tide was just coming in, and they just watched it float out to sea.
Oh my
You have
goodness.
to know when to drive. You can't mess with it.
Wow. Do you sail or surf or do anything like that?
I have tons of friends who surf or what's it called? Yes,
Paddleboard?
thank you. um, I am not fearless in the ocean as I used to be when I was young. My daughters, I have three grown daughters, they're in their 20s, and they could spend hours in the ocean riding the waves. They don't surf, but they just, swim out there with all their friends all the time. Yeah, I like the bay a little more, I think, for those kind of things. I'm just scared in my old age of the waves, I think. I'm not that old, but I'm scared.
Yeah, I know. I do enjoy. We have ocean kayaks, which are pretty heavy, and so the risk of getting toppled over them in them is, not too great. However, we did one time try to get the kayaks out, and there were just a few waves, and I got hit by one that just kind of came out of nowhere and toppled me over. And the big story was that I lost my phone, my
uh,
my dear my dear iPhone, which I felt like I had lost a limb at that point. The ocean just took it away. I did a podcast episode about it because it was really so traumatic.
my characters surf. There's a whole chapter in On Fire Island, my novel, where the protagonist is out on the ocean and sees a dolphin, and it's a beautiful, beautiful chapter that really reflects just the beauty of the ocean and the
Yeah.
peacefulness of being out there, and how the sound is a little different. Everything feels a little different from that perspective, that like great, vast perspective of the ocean.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my next question was about this book about Fire Island. And I was reading some of the reviews, and there was one that I thought, well, they were all beautiful, but this one really summarizes for me what I would relate to. And this was Annabelle Monahan's review. She is the author of Nora Goes Off Script. Sounds like another great
It
book.
is.
Yeah, and she says, with her trademark humor and eloquence, Jane L. Rosen transports us to a summer paradise where an unforgettable cast of multi-generational characters sustain each other through every kind of love and loss. On Fire Island, it's fun and fast-paced, but it's also beautifully rendered meditation on the human condition. Don't miss this one. It's perfect. I just love what she said, and so many parts of that, like transporting us to a summer paradise. I mean, when we're reading a book, that, especially when you're reading a book on the beach, you just want to be transported. So tell me about that first.
You know, it's the place I've wanted to write about for so long. It's the place that's closest to my heart. So it really, I do believe, really comes across in the pages. I think that you'll leave thinking you've been to Fire Island. I talk a lot about, like we were talking about Harry Belafonte, I talk about there have been tons of famous people that have lived on Fire Island. It started out with, they say, like with pirates, like the name Fire Island is because the pirates would build fires on the island and attract boats and then pillage them. Very interesting history. Then there were moonshine makers inhabited the island, and then they said like communists inhabited the island, and that was followed by actors. So there's tons of names of writers and actors. I mean, the writers, Truman Capote, Herman Wouk, Thurber, on and on. There's just so many writers that have lived there. Arthur Miller used to come with Marilyn Monroe, and he'd play baseball on the corner, at my corner where the baseball field is, because they would stay with her acting coach who lived there. It was just, it's a very storied place with a long history. So it's that part of it is very interesting to me. It really is. Fanny Bryce owned the house that the town's camp is in. You know, funny girl Fanny Bryce, and there's just it could go on and on with the history of this place. It's,
Yeah. Well, I can imagine then for a writer, what better place to be knowing all this history and just and that spirit around you. I can just imagine how inspiring that would be. And then
it's magical. It's a magical place. There, and again with the no cars, everyone's on their bicycle or walking, and the kids they get to just be free. By like the age of 6, your kid could ride their bicycle to the market, sign their name for a sandwich, go eat it on the dock with their friends. I mean, there were times when I didn't see my kids for like 6 hours at a time, and I was not worried because, like, even if they fell off their bike, they would know the person at the house on the corner to like wash off their knee or whatever it is. It's a very safe, beautiful, simple existence. We lived there for 6 months during COVID, and it was pretty unbelievable because we never are there for more than 3 months. The water's turned off in November and is turned on again in April. And we stayed like past the election. We stayed through most of November that year, the main year of COVID. And no one there got COVID. It was like a bubble. And it was beautiful. You emailed the market. You didn't go in. You emailed, you said what you needed. They left the bags outside. And that was the way it worked for months. And we played baseball with the kids and the moms and the dads, like 4 afternoons a week because there were so many kids out there being like homeschooled because of COVID.
mm-hmm.
So we would play ball at 4 o'clock when school was out, you know, technically out. We even had a big Halloween game where we all were in costumes. It was really making the best out of a bad situation. And we were very lucky to be able to be there.
We just had no idea what was going on in the rest of the world. We were just kind of living our lives here in this bubble, and how different it would have been had we not had the beach there to go to. I mean, being cooped up in a house or an apartment or whatever is stressful. So it was really nice to have a place to go out and at least be in that energy and that in nature.
Yeah, we were coming from Manhattan, and I lived near the highway, and you could hear like 13 ambulances a night. I mean, by the time the beach opened up, I was so grateful to be able to just get away from that alone.
Yeah. I know a little bit about that too. I worked in Manhattan for a couple of summers in college. We worked on the corner of 56th and 5th for a publishing company, small library trade publishing company, and my roommate, we lived out in Hoboken before Hoboken became the place to live, and we were just dying to go to the beach. So he said, well, there's Jones Beach. We can hop on the train and go there. And so we did. We did that. It was not so idyllic as where you are, but it was kind of nice to get out of the city.
Jones Beach is the beach I grew up going to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a beautiful beach.
Yeah.
Beautiful boardwalk, and it's nice.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was. I wanted to get to this unforgettable cast of multi-generational characters.
On Fire Island is really, at its heart, the story of 3 men, a 16-year-old boy, a 40-year-old man, and an 80-year-old man, who all end up living together in one house for one summer. It's, different reasons why they all end up like that. But that friendship of these 3 men may seem odd, but it's not odd on Fire Island. I have friends who are 16 and I have friends who are 80. It's just the way a small town feels. It's just the way things work. That we all play ball together. We all sit on the beach together. We all are in the same little market, buying our food. And it's just a very intergenerational place. And I think it's beautiful even for like young kids to be able to speak to older people with so much respect and just interest, like the world now, everyone pushes old people aside, or a lot of people do, when they really have so much to give and so much to say and are no different than us. They're just older.
Right.
Yeah. And the same with young people. It's a great place to really understand what every age is thinking and going through. And I adore those friendships.
Absolutely. When you take into consideration all the wisdom that our older friends have and people in our lives, and then seeing the younger ones experience life and hopefully taking a little advice from, from the older folks. But just that whole blending and that energy, I can imagine just it all coming together that would make a really great story. I really love that premise. Is it based on people that you know?
Well, that's the big question that I've been getting because the book came out 2 weeks ago, and people from Fire Island have been asking me, is this person? Is this that person? Is this person? And in all truth, I say it's fictional and it's like an amalgamation of everybody. Like, there are all these baseball players. There are like all these cranky older men. So one of the main characters, the 80-year-old, he's like just a mix-up, a mashup of every every old guy out there. So some of the characters are more closely relatable. I mean, there's a friendship between two kids that very much is my youngest daughter's friendship with her best friend out there. But in the book, it's a boy and a girl, and in real life, they're two girls. So it's nothing is exact by any means. And yeah, I couldn't even really pin most people on any one person. Mm-hmm. But people are asking and coming up with multitudes of conclusions on their own.
I could imagine living there and reading the book and thinking, is she talking about me?
Yes.
Yeah, as a writer, I'm fascinated with the process. I love books. I majored in English in college, but I had no desire to either teach or write or anything. It was just something that I really got the best grades in. But I'm really fascinated with the writing process, and I know this is not your first book, but have you always wanted to be an author? Has it just been in you?
Yeah, I think it's always been in me. And I remember like in 6th grade, when I would write a short story, my teacher would ask me to bring it around to all the other teachers in the school to let them read it. So right from then, I knew that there was something, but I got waylaid. And in college, I majored in fashion, and I worked in the garment center in New York for years. And when I had children, I went back to writing because it was easier to do in the small windows of opportunities that I would have in each day to have some time, for myself. I wish I did things differently. When I look back, I wish I was an English major like you were, and I think that would have been fantastic. But at the time, I just didn't see myself supporting myself that way, and I just, went for the sure thing. My writing process for this book, I used to be a screenwriter before I was a novelist. And I actually wrote on Fire Island as a screenplay first. So this book had a very different process because it was as if I had this very intricate, complicated outline to write the book. Because I really did. Especially the dialogue, a lot of it was established. I ended up adding a narrator, a female narrator, and that changed things a lot, and it got me to really explore different avenues that I hadn't with the screenplay. But usually I get an idea, I let it brew, and then I start making notes and making an outline on index cards. And when I get to the end of the book, in index cards, meaning I have a beginning, I have a middle, I have an end, I look at it, think about it, and then I never look at it again, and I just start writing from page 1. Yes, because there's just something about knowing that I have all the parts that gives me the freedom to go. It would be pretty scary for me to write a book that I only had the beginning of, or the middle of, or the end of. So, yeah, that's the way I work.
Yeah, wow. What's the difference between writing a screenplay and a novel?
It's a big difference. I mean, I was trained to write screenplays, and meaning I went to school for it after college. And I think to me, it's easier to write a screenplay until it gets purchased. And then it is so much harder. So for example, you write a book, you work with one editor, you help pick out the cover, you help pick out the fonts, you pick out the person who reads it for Audible. I mean, you're very, very involved. Even though those things are probably not your area of expertise, it's your book. When you sell a screenplay, the minute you sell it, it's theirs. You have to kind of do what they say. So if they say, we really need you to make everyone into Martians, you're going home and making everyone into Martians. And that's kind of tough, It doesn't always work that they should be Martians.
Right.
Big exaggerated example, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, they might as well be Martians if they're not the character that you had envisioned. I mean, it's something that you have to really make up out of something.
Yeah, it's tough. But I mean, it's also, I love writing very visually, like cinematically in my head. Even when I write a novel, I still see it like I would see a screenplay. Mm-hmm. I still see the visual of what's going on as I'm writing. And apparently that's not the case with everyone. Some people really just are in the words and in the story, but they're not picturing it in their head as it goes along. So I do write very visually. When you write a novel, you have to put in all the description. When you write a screenplay, they don't want you to put in all the description. They want to say, like, Paige and Jane are speaking for a podcast. Jane's in her living room. Paige is in her office. That's it. It's someone else's job to decorate what that room looks like. So in a book, I would maybe say, I describe what your room looked like, or I describe how your hair looks, or whatever it is. It's really not the job in a screenplay.
Right. I would agonize over every word and rewrite sentences over and over and over again. I can just see myself. Because when I read a book, I like to read every word because I feel like I want to honor the person that wrote it and honor the words, because sometimes there are words you're trying to find the right word to describe that, and well,
it's hard.
Yeah, for me, when I feel like I nailed it, it's usually after a long drawn out process, at least when I'm trying to describe something. So I really appreciate that aspect of it. Does it come to you easy, or? I
mean, most of the time it does come to me rather easily. I have gotten stuck in the past, but not many times. Actually, I have a great story. My second book, Eliza Starts a Rumor, I needed to do this big plot twist. My editor said, right here, you have to, I don't remember what it was, but I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. And I was like, wow, this is a problem. And I was getting my hair blown out in a place called Blow Bar or something, Dry Bar. Now, if you've ever been to a place like that, Dry Bar has romantic comedies playing on the televisions. They have rap music playing overhead. And the woman who was drying my hair was talking my ear off. And the blow dryer. And I had my computer, and during all that noise, it came to me. And from that, I learned something very interesting, that sometimes the more noise there is, the better I could think.
Wow.
You know how when you can't remember a word and you're trying to think of the word and it does not come
always.
To you, and then you go and do something else and it comes to
always,
you?
Yes.
That is the same. I think it's the same concept. I think there's just something about not thinking about something that allows it to come to you.
Wow. And was that the plot twist that you ended up going with? And
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even remember what it was right now, but yeah, it was, and I was fretting. I was like, wow, if I don't figure this out, this book's in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned now that I'll go to Orange Theory, which is my exercise class, and things will come to me while the music's blasting and while the coach is, yelling 10 more push-ups, and I'll run out and write it down.
That is so interesting you say that, because I'm fairly new in the podcast world in that this is my 65th or so episode. Around 50, I was getting to that pod fade point where it was just this, do I really want to keep doing this? Is it fun? Is anybody listening? So I went out for a walk, and I walk on the beach quite often. and just the aspect of walking on the beach. And I think I was listening to one of my favorite podcasters, and not so much about what he was saying, except there was one thing that he said that kind of flipped a switch in my brain. But I think that aspect of just kind of getting my body moving, and it wasn't that I was looking for an answer at that time. I'm just going to go for a walk and listen to the podcast. And then it dawned on me, do this. And I did it. And it just kind of reignited my love for podcasting and just to keep it going. And I think that the beach does that so well. And I'm just wondering if you've had any like super aha moments while you've been walking on the beach. Or
so a lot of this book is about the afterlife.
Oh, actually. Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's told by a woman who just passed away. That's the narrator. And it's not sad. I mean, I know that sounds sad, but I think it's a hopeful, uplifting book. It's definitely sad at times, but mostly you'll laugh and feel hope. So the summer before my mom passed away, she was 92 at the time, and on Facebook someone said there are dolphins on the beach. And she was visiting me, and I said, Mom, there are dolphins on the beach, let's go. And my mom had me when she was 40, so she was always the older mom. But that being said, she was the most spry, fit woman. She was a gym teacher. She could outwalk me, outrun me, all of that. So we head to the beach, and at this point, at 92, she had a cane, more to make sure she didn't fall. And we're walking down the beach, and I turn around, and she's all, way behind me. And she says, and because I always forgot that she's old. It was like, oh, you're old. And she's like, Jane, I can't keep up. You go without me. I said, don't be silly. There'll be other dolphins. It's not a big deal. And we turned around and walked back to the house. A year later, she died over that winter. I'm sleeping in my bed. It's 8:30 in the morning, and I'm not one to go out. I usually write in the morning. I'm not one to get up at that to me is early to go walking on the beach. I go like at 10:30, not 8:30. Mm-hmm. But I have plans to meet someone at 8:30 to walk on the beach. He was a renowned psychiatrist from Manhattan. I'm sleeping, and I have a dream about 5 dolphins. They come to the shore, and they all wave to me. I wake up. I throw on my shorts, in my pajama top. I go down barefoot. There's my friend outside my house. As we walk the few houses away to the beach, I said, I just had the craziest, most realistic dream that there were 5 dolphins waving to me from the beach. We walk up over the stairs and down onto the beach, and there are 5 dolphins. And she was convinced. She's like, you had a sight.
I was just going to say, this is a psychiatrist you're talking to. So
yes.
Was she immediately drawn to, okay, what's in her psyche that's bringing that out?
Yes, it was unbelievable. She was just, wow, you had a vision, she said.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I think I did. And I'm not that, hokey like that, but there's not many explanations for it.
I totally, totally believe stories like that. And I think that's beautiful. It was maybe your mother just showing up one morning to say,
that's what it felt like.
Hi, I'm here.
It really did feel like that.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Such a beautiful story. Wow. What do you want your readers to come away with from reading this book? What was your intention? What would you like us to know?
And there was 2 reasons for it. I really wanted to share my love for Fire Island and do it justice. So the story, to me, is very much my Fire Island, and it's my best story. You know what I mean by that? Like, I've been working on it because it was a screenplay first. I just feel like there'll never be a better story from me than the one that's in this book. I hope that doesn't sound conceited, but that's the truth. I don't think I'll do better than this story. I also wanted to write about death in a hopeful way, in a way that death is not the end, and you still have relationships with whoever you love, whether they're here standing next to you visibly or they're here in your soul. They're still there. The love does not go away, and you could still talk to them and know what they would say and what they would do. And I think that's important. I think it's a really important lesson for people at the worst times in their lives. And I think this book is uplifting that way.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes you feel like death is not the end.
Right.
And I wanted to get that across through my story. So hopefully, that's what people have been loving about it, to be honest. Yeah.
Well, this came at a really serendipitous time because I was just going to put out a message to my listeners of what's your favorite beach read, or what book do you want to read this summer, or that sort of thing. And I've got one to add to the list now. Definitely. I'm really looking forward to reading it and sharing it with my listeners. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me a little bit about Fire Island. And we have Harry Belafonte in common.
So bizarre. I mean, I really think if they went to visit, they may have stayed in my house.
That's entirely true. I'll have to ask my brother if maybe he remembers the story. Yeah, that would be really interesting. Well, thanks again for coming on. I really look forward to reading the book and sharing it with others. And I love that it's all about the beach and how the beach speaks to you and speaks to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Paige. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
The beach is speaking. Are you listening? Wow, what an extraordinary beach connection. I believe there's something extra special about a book when you know a little about the story behind the story and what inspired the author to write it. On Fire Island is, by Jane's own admission, her best work, and I believe her. You can feel the connection. I hope today's conversation inspires you to listen closely to how the beach speaks to you and let its message encourage you to explore your own creative expression. Maybe you'll be inspired to write a book of your own. And speaking of books, now that summer has arrived and many of you are headed to the beach, will there be a book in your beach bag? I'm making a list of books I want to read on the beach, and On Fire Island is on the top. I'll be posting the list on my website soon, so let me know what your favorite beach read is, and I'll add it to the list. It's easy. Just leave a note on my website or record a voicemail. The beach is speaking. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Beach Speaks. If you like what you heard, share the podcast with another beach lover. And speaking of sharing, I want to know how the beach is speaking to you. To record a message, just go to my website, thebeachspeaks.com, click the voicemail button, it's super easy, and I'll play it on the show. And if more beach is what you crave, visit thebeachspeaks.com or follow The Beach Speaks on Facebook and Instagram, where I post all my gorgeous sunrise photos and videos. It's another way for you to reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. The beach is speaking. Are you listening?